I grew up in probably one of the worst neighborhoods in my city. Not only was our elementary school severely underfunded, but the whole neighborhood was a hot mess. Correction, is a hot mess. Hearing gunshots is the norm around here. Usually they're in the distance, maybe a few roads down. Other times... At one point, we even had a bullet land into our roof, and it thankfully didn't make it all the way through and no one got hurt. Our front door neighbors had to put up bars on their doors and windows because someone kept trying to break in. Thankfully, our home already came with those installed. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, people driving super loud trucks around 3 a.m. for literally no other reason than to be annoying. We have this one white truck that is infamous around here for being the loud, annoying truck. One time, that guy was so drunk, he crashed into the light pole outside our house, falling into the ditch. His truck was stuck and flipped on its side, but he left before the cops even arrived, so I don't know what ended up happening to that guy. Marital disputes happen a lot out in the road, lots of stray dogs and cats, beer bottles being left out in the front yard, fireworks and gunfire for literally every single holiday, and God, if it's 4th of July or New Year's, then expect to hear it for at least a week before and after the actual day of. If our neighbors are having a party, the whole street gets so full of cars that you can't even get into your own home. And then they play music until 3 a.m. loud enough to hear it in your dreams. We have had 2 houses down the street from us that have gotten swatted, and I'm talking the whole squad breaking down the door and smashing in every single window.
FBI, open up!
And yet, my family has lived here for at least 20 years. And I know I've been hating, but a lot of our neighbors are really awesome people, and some of them are very close friends with my parents. But besides all of that, I just always hated living in that neighborhood, and my parents have always talked about moving. But there's one incident that occurred not too long ago that made them seriously start thinking about it. Let me set the scene.
It was a slow weekend.
I'm sorry. It was a slow weekend at home. We had heard a few gunshots that afternoon that sounded very close. No one thought much of it. Like I said, gunshots around here are a daily occurrence. There are a few cops roaming slowly around our neighborhood, which was odd because no one really calls for gunshots around here. We saw them make rounds around the neighborhood, but we began to ignore them after a while, assuming they would find whoever they were looking for eventually. Once the sun set, we heard a helicopter above us. They would continuously fly in and out of the neighborhood. Again, not strange, but everything was feeling eerily close. The commotion wasn't enough to keep us from going to bed once it got late. So around 12 a.m., we departed from the living room to our own respective rooms, except my brother. He decided to go to the back of the house and play some video games. He hadn't been playing for long when he heard 3 very clear knocks at the door. You see, our house is pretty large. The previous owner connected the garage with the main house, which created the second living room. That's where my brother was. That room has a door that leads right outside. That door used to be barred, so it had like the glass barred door and then the normal wooden door. But the barred door had recently fallen off the hinges. It was an expensive fix, so my dad hadn't come around to getting it done yet. Anyways, my brother paused the game and walked to the door. And again, clear as day, not banging, not rushed. The knocking was so casual, in fact, that he thought it was my mom outside, so he reached for the door handle. Maybe she just got locked out, he thought. But as soon as he went to turn the handle, he stopped. Something told him to check the people. When he did, what he saw made his heart fall to his stomach. There was a man in a white shirt covered in blood. Remember, it was night and it was dark, but this man was so covered in blood that it was just undeniable. And one of his hands was behind his back. My brother slowly backed away from the door, panic rising. As he did, he realized it was just this one wooden door separating him and this stranger. He quickly but quietly ran to turn off the lights in the living room, closing the door of the living room into the main part of the house to create more of a barrier between us and this bloody man outside. At this point, I was in my room watching a YouTube video, lights
Burger
off.
King foot lettuce.
Turn the lights off, turn the lights off. ¿Qué pasó? The lights, turn them off. Shh. ¿Qué pasa? There's a bloody man. I heard this entire conversation from inside my room, and my instinct was to run and hide in my closet. Not very brave, but at that point, I really thought there was a man inside the house. "I'm gonna go check," my dad said. "Are you crazy? He's covered in blood," my brother exclaimed. At that point, my dad and brother began to argue because my dad was adamant about checking, and obviously that was a horrible idea. I was crying at that point because it felt like my worst fears were coming true. All these episodes of Criminal Minds and horror podcasts all came rushing back to my head. 911, what's your emergency? Yeah, there's a bloody man knocking on our door. There are patrol cars in your neighborhood already. Please do not open any doors or go outside. And they weren't kidding. At that point, I realized it was safe, and though I was still crying and panicking, I left the closet. We were all standing in the darkness when we suddenly saw police lights flashing outside. A few police cars pulled up to our home and got out. The nosiness beat our fears, and we peered cautiously through the window blinds. The police walked around the outside of our home with flashlights. For a while, it seemed like they couldn't find anyone. But then suddenly, right in front of our house, we see this skinny dude in a white shirt covered in blood run down the street. A few police officers start chasing him, and a few run back to their cars to follow. It would take them hours to catch this guy. I eventually ended up falling asleep in the living room, but my parents and brother stayed up watching some of the other events unfold. Later into the night, there were a few gunshots heard. Though they didn't know exactly what happened, it was after these gunshots that everything seemed to stop. In the morning, one of the streets was blocked off with crime scene tape. And not only that, but our door the guy had been knocking on had stains of blood on it, as did our fence that led into our backyard. A few detectives came to talk to my brother the next morning, but I had to Google online to find out exactly what happened. Apparently, this bloody guy lived a few doors down from us. He had gone into some sort of altercation with two people that lived in the house and shot them both. Thankfully, they both lived, but they had called the police on him, which led to these cops on a several-hour-long pursuit. I guess the guy had just been sneaking around the neighborhood the whole time, until finally, late into the hours of the night, he had a shootout with one of the officers and his dog. He ended up shooting both the officer and the canine, but thankfully both ended up living, and the guy ended up getting shot by them. And oh my god, is that not extremely terrifying? I still think about this incident to this day. What if my brother had opened the door? What did this guy expect to happen? Why knock on our door? What if we had opened it? Would he have held us hostage? Hurt us? What was his plan here? Honestly, I'm glad I'll never have to know.